Hello and welcome to the G3 Pulse podcast. We're chatting today to Filippos Antonopoulos, CEO of OKTO. Hello, Filippos.
Hi, Lewis.
Good to speak to you. Welcome to the podcast. In many ways, this feels a little bit like part two of a debate we started last year when we interviewed Trustly's Samuel Barrett and OKTO's own Simon Dawson about the Cashless Imperative. We'll leave a link in the description below to anyone who wants to check out that podcast. But to start this one, I want to begin by asking Filippos, what is the Cashless Imperative for gaming?
I'm going to give you a little bit of a catchy answer. I think it very simply is that you cannot be a leader or want to be a leader in gaming without having a cashless strategy. That's the Cashless Imperative.
Okay. I mean, for me, last year, we're talking to Simon. OKTO took a very different strategy to its stance that it wasn't selling. You obviously have OKTO Wallet and you have OKTO Cash, very much cashless products. But you've chosen to instead educate people with a philosophy of a cashless revolution. And I was wondering, why take this approach as opposed to actually having a product-led campaign?
Well, you asked before, the word imperative is a pretty strong word. Yeah. And at the same time, OKTO has bet on a global trend. We're not betting on a product or a service as investors, as founders of this business. So OKTO wishes to ride on a global trend, which is that of the digitalization of payments. And together with these payments, there are a few other things that are being digitalized, together with obviously the identification and registration of the users being of the payer, okay. Right? So for us, it's very important to educate because there's a twofold trend happening here. One is from the consumer and the consumer technology point of view. Obviously, digital payments is blowing up. But at the same time, there are two regulators, one being, let's say, the payment regulator and the other one being the gaming regulator, that are both pushing, each in their own way and with their own motives and reasons towards something that converges with cashless. Either that be player protection or registered and tracked and monitored transactions. So it's so much more important that gaming operators understand how powerful these trends are and how present they are as opposed to future or futuristic. Okay. And then I guess it stands to reason that if one, us in this particular case, does a good job educating, then they will obviously be a solution of choice.
Okay. Going back to, I've been presenting panels and sessions before in the past, and this idea of cash is king in the gaming industry is, I'm just wondering, do you think that's now exploded? Do you think that idea is becoming myth? Or is it that, time, convenience, and COVID have eroded it? And kind of at the final part of that kind of question to you is, where do we stand in 2021 in regards to the acceptance of cash over digital?
Yeah, well, I guess obviously the pandemic, I personally believe that the pandemic didn't change things as much as it accelerated things. Okay, so there were underlying currents or trends that were massively exposed by the pandemic as opposed to things changing. Okay. So in that particular case, I think there's a couple of myths that got busted. Myth number one, unregistered player. I know that, in this conversation, we'll touch upon that as well. And I think myth number two was cash is king. Look, I think ultimately cash is king is an old adage that just is a good reminder for people to remember that liquidity is what's important. But nowadays, this liquidity is very easily accessible through digital paths and not just, hand in pocket paper money path.
Okay.
So, yes, it has exploded, but the power keg wasn't put in place because of the pandemic or during the pandemic. I think it was there before, but perhaps, a couple of more sparks, have been, blowing things up the past year and a half.
Well, you talked a little bit about the word imperative. It was that urgency to it. Is there still that urgency to this, or is this now? Are we further along, rather than the spark? Are we further along the explosive part of that route?
No, I think that the urgency is here and now, and it would have been exposed, and it would have been less of an urgency and more of a, oh my God, we actually dropped the ball here. We actually failed. If it hadn't been for that year and a half of the pandemic, where on the one hand things got accelerated, but on the other hand, mistakes have been hidden under the carpet because shops have been closed.
Yeah.
So, obviously, I don't think that the gaming operators that haven't fully adopted cashless, are sitting on a mistake, that it's too late to revert. But at the same time, I do think, we all here do think, that it's imperative that they move very quickly.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned regulators before and their motives. I'm just wondering, does the underlying regulation that they have to actually impose, is that adapting enough to the pace of change and keeping up with the digitalization?
Well, I think the token answer here, Lewis, is not fast enough, right? I don't think there is anyone that has ever, I think that private business obviously would like regulators to move a little faster. However, I will give here a dichotomy.
Okay.
On the one hand, yes, regulation is moving faster than we've seen in the past, but not fast enough in terms of, really embracing digital payments across gaming. Fine. And there are a few reasons for that. Maybe there are some legacy laws. Maybe the speed of homologation and certification with game regulators is a little bit slower as a process in general.
Okay.
Fine. However, I do want to focus on the brighter side of things, which is that both gaming and payment regulators are actually the catalyst here. They are part of the movement forward. And it's us as private businesses that are not moving fast enough to converge and comply. So, for example, the sixth AML directive across Europe is pretty much saying that all transactions should be monitored.
Yeah.
That's what the essence of the sixth AML directive is. You see that many countries, some of them very important ones, Germany, Finland, the UK, all in their own way, have said that I want players to be tracked across channels, so retail and online. I no longer want unregistered betting or gaming in retail. I want to have either affordability checks or even hard caps on spending, on a monthly basis. So, look, Lewis, whether or not we agree with them as an industry, and there are a few that do go further than they should,
okay.
And they are being intrusive in how they regulate things. But they are a reality, and they do represent a trend.
Yeah.
They are not isolated cases. Things are moving to that direction. And so, in that sense, I think that on the one hand, bureaucracy and certification don't move fast enough. On the other hand, private operators and us, as an ecosystem, need to move faster in order to really comply with things as they stand and will stand from a regulatory perspective.
Okay. It feels like the regulators then aren't being the hindrance, but the regulations are. Would that be accurate?
Look, if we're going to look to grade versus perfect, like I said before, But again, it's important not to look for excuses, because this is not just a regulatory trend, it's also a massive consumer trend as well.
Okay.
And so, if one looks to hide behind a pretty decent excuse that, hey, my regulator is not moving fast enough, I think that, really a cruel answer to that is, I don't think your players are going to give you this excuse when they move on to the competition, or they are no longer able to play with you because you didn't comply.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned anonymity a little bit a second ago, and it's been used as the kind of key witness for the defense against the idea of digitalization. What role does anonymity play in the conversations that you're having with operators and with developers as well?
Okay, so I guess, Lewis, part of the question around anonymity is that there is a lot of let's say preference to remain anonymous in order to better protect maybe the data and the individual and all that, right?
Okay.
So I guess this leads us to a little bit of a dead end from a rationalization point of view. So if we're saying that the best way to protect somebody is to make sure that they remain anonymous, is like saying that the best data protection strategy is to have no data at all. Okay. So it's a reduction to absurd kind of process, right? Obviously, I'm here to argue, and there are a lot of businesses in this industry that are here to argue that the best way to protect is to establish data protection and player protection measures. And I want to say that there's a couple of regulators out there, like the UK one, that says that, look, guys, the longer you keep players anonymous, the longer you keep them unprotected, and sometimes even from their own selves, from this excessive behavior. And so, as most of the UK operators that I've spoken to would say, is let's register, let's eponymize, but let's do all of our protections via a big data approach. Okay. So not a case by case that is very restrictive, difficult, expensive, and ultimately unfair, I want to say. But in a big data way, we can be very powerful, obviously, with big data analytics, and make sure that we protect players while also protecting data anonymity, within the GDPR framework, etc. So I think that's our opinion.
And do you think the gaming industry is different from others in which the player has been given this kind of anonymity and this idea of anonymity that has been in some way made sacred? That the regulator wants the information, but the player doesn't want to give it? Or are we now in a position in which the regular public gives its data freely all the time, and gaming slightly at a different level, thinking that the players are different? Do you see that that running in parallel?
Yeah. Well, I think that yes. At the end there, I think you are also thinking about how we as consumers don't realize how much of our data and profile is out there. So yeah, that's definitely sometimes also much less a misunderstanding and maybe more of an illusion. Yes. I think with the fact that you do have powers to be that can protect all of these things, such as Brussels and the regulators. Also, for example, Apple has made steps towards protecting better, the iOS data universe versus the Facebook application on Apple, etc. So, obviously, any answer to your question has to be mindful of how we swim in this digital universe, right?
Yeah.
Now, I think that, hey, come on. As a consumer and as a player, and then as operators being, receiving this clientele, I think that we can strike a pretty easy understanding, a balanced understanding where, hey, if you want to participate in the game of chance, and if you want to be offered the best that's out there, and something that's super entertaining, and it looks like your online alternative, especially in the game on the retail side, look, I gotta take some bits of data off of you. Yeah. Why? Because first of all, it's the law. It's the law of the land. But also because ultimately it just makes things better for you, while at the same time keeping you protected and anonymous to the extent that you care about. So we won't be writing emails to your known ones or to friends and relatives about your activity. However, we should and we must be able to send data sets, including your own activity as a player, to our regulator, because that's the law.
Yeah. I mean, related to that, obviously the question on anonymity is how digital payments enable digital identification, which you touched upon, and how does this help operators, particularly land-based operators, manage their AML and KYC obligations? And we're seeing that in more and more announcements from regulators, announcements from governments, new laws that are being enacted in Germany and Holland. They're imposing these already. We're just kind of catching up in terms of how that comes across. Do you see this as being a requirement? Is cashless going to become a requirement for operators, do you believe, as part of being able to make those obligations?
Without a doubt. Look, I think that cashless is a word that encaptures two things, right? One is the term itself, cashless, so payment via digital means, and the other one is what cashless obviously implies, which is registered activity. So then that by default and also by design registers and does full KYC on the user that wants to become a player, right? So for us as fintech providers, that person, he or she, is a user. And then they are a player to the gaming operator. So we can verify their age limit. So therefore we can play to the age limit that is, on the other side of the fence, on the gaming side.
Okay.
Obviously verify full ID, address and all that stuff. We can protect them against payment fraud, but also protect the gaming operator from payment fraud. And ultimately we can keep monitor transaction history with all kinds of benefits that this can provide. So I think it's a two-in-one, both by design and by default.
Right, and that ticks a lot of the responsible gaming practice boxes that we're seeing now cropping up. The ones that are being introduced in Spain, the ones that are being introduced in the UK, are right across Europe as well. And do you see as the cashless imperative not just the idea of changing to a slicker means of payment, but to actually that protection of the customer at the same time? And is that something that needs to be pushed from the operator, or the actual players pulling that as well?
Look, that's a difficult answer, because I'm not entirely sure statistically how many are the players that would need us as an industry on the gaming side to protect them, maybe against themselves even, if it's a problematic gaming behavior. I frankly do believe that we're talking about a small statistical size.
Okay.
Significant, don't let me not be misunderstood, but fairly small. So that's why I'm saying it's a little bit difficult, because here we're trying to establish, the terms and conditions of play, so that we can protect what I think is, a minority, is a few. At the same time, though, however, digital payments, effectively help all sides, both the majority that play healthily and the small minority that, unfortunately, for reasons of their own, are obviously faced with such, severe issues like problematic gaming.
Okay.
Because we can obviously introduce cool-off periods, frequency of play, limits to play. And let me say something here. It's not enough for the gaming industry to regulate its own activity. It has to be done together with the payments, because consider this. Consider operator A abiding to the limits in Germany, in UK, or Spain, but then player A playing across operator A, B, and C. So ultimately, obviously, against best efforts, this player continues to, demonstrate this problematic behavior, and going against his or her own interests. However, if the payment industry, joins into this matrix, and then player A has to use a digital means of payments to play across operator A, B, and C, it becomes a lot easier to protect that player against, his or her own habits, as part of the example.
Yeah, I mean, I just read the regulations for Germany, and all the things they're putting in place to protect the player. It felt almost like the word should have been used to just put cashless in, and it was the kind of the elephant in the room that it wasn't in the legislation. When in actual fact, if you just added cashless here, it ticked so many different of those different requirements. It was kind of an obvious solution to it.
And you know what, Louis? I agree with you fully. And here is the small irony. It's my opinion, obviously not being a German regulator, that part of the reason why it's not there is because, especially in retail gaming, there are different laws, one of which does not allow explicitly digital payments onto arcades and AWP machines,
right.
whereas other forms of gaming in land-based are mostly accepting digital forms of payments,
right.
with a few exceptions in various states of the of the federation that is Germany. So I fully agree with you. It was right there. It's almost like
it's on the tip of somebody's tongue, but they didn't add it in for whatever reasons. That it just felt like, am I missing something? Where's the word appearing?
I think it's a matter of time, Lewis. I think it's a matter of time.
Yeah.
And in fact, I can even share that I do know that there are quite a few operators that consider it to be reality already.
Yeah, it seems to tick all the boxes.
Have moved to that direction proactively.
Yeah. Kind of feeding off that, are the payment stakeholders prepared for the transactional volumes and payment behaviors? I mean, COVID, as you say, has been a catalyst. It's not particularly changed, but it has been a catalyst, and we're seeing so many digital payments requested at the moment. Is the pace of change too quick at the moment? Can we all kind of fit all these systems together and put them all together with the requirements in the small time space we have?
There's a challenge here. And I think that's a very honest thing to admit from the payments and fintech point of view.
Right.
The challenge is the following simple fact. Gaming is classified as a high-risk business, so high-risk activity. So merchants whose professional activity is gaming are termed under high risk, across schemes like MasterCard, Visa, but also most commercial banks that I know of in Europe, as well as regulators, payment regulators.
Okay.
So the conundrum here is that on the one hand, you've got an industry that by self-regulating very properly and very nicely, and converging to the technology that's out there, wants to digitize a big chunk of its legacy activity, the legacy business.
Okay.
At the same time, doing so is being, I'm not sure which word I would use, not curtailed, hindered, maybe, slowed down, maybe.
Suppressed.
Yeah. By the fact that all of that volume is classified as high risk.
Right.
So one big challenge that we embrace here at OKTO, and actually, if you'd like, a personal ambition for all of us that are coming from the gaming space, is that we would love to take this opportunity and convince the regulators and the schemes and everything that there does not exist one gaming industry. There exist two gaming industries. One that is fully compliant, fully regulated, and entirely in step with the technology advancements, and that's low risk.
Okay.
That's low risk. It's not high risk. And of course, there is a bit of a high risk industry, which is the offshores, which is the unregulated parts, which is more gray area and gray jurisdictions activities and all that. But I'm personally a firm believer that this is something that can be argued for against anybody or in front of anybody.
The big existential debate within gaming operations at the moment is about how to attract the next generation of players. And I'm wondering, from what we've spoken about so far, how large a role do you believe digitalization of payments play in the transition? And is cashless now a must-have for gaming businesses moving forward? Is that kind of your view? Do you have to have cashless to be able to operate from 2021 onwards?
Well, Lewis, I try to, maybe prong a little bit or challenge a little bit, my partners and colleagues and any operator that I speak with. And I try to tell them that, let's take the two of us, right? I mean, I'm sure that you transact also, if not majorly, through digital means of payments, right? So you use your mobile phone. You've probably inserted your debit or credit in Apple Pay or Google Pay, depending on which brand you have, manufacturer. Same with me. And, I always take this poll in the room, and everybody, from the gaming operator side will say, yeah, me too. Oh, I love this. I've done the Apple Pay. I don't like this part, but I like this part, etc., etc. And then I say, hey, guys, or also ladies, depending on the makeup of the room, you do realize that, I'm 38 and I'm maybe the youngest in the room, or so I get that it's obvious that for Gen Z we need digital payments, but hey, how about the 40s?
Yeah.
Are they already your customers? Well, at the same time, they are digital savants who use digital payments. So what about them? I think it's a reality. I think it's right now. I don't think there is anything to do with the future. By doing it to address your current clientele, it's by obvious extension of the rational way of thinking that Gen Z is going to follow.
Filippos, why, in your view, have retailers not taken omnichannel seriously until now? And whether taking it seriously is too harsh a word for the kind of how they try to install and bring omnichannel functionality to their operations. What do you think has been the reason behind that, and the reason why we're so far behind other retail venues as well?
So look, I think, like you said, I think the intention was always serious, but there are certain realities that have made it very difficult. So I mean, I'll answer this also wearing the hat of the investments that we have in the gaming space per se, and also running a gaming vendor for so many years. It's very, very seldom the case that an online moving to retail or retail moving to online more likely has done so using the same technologies, especially on the bet acceptance or casino management system side of things. And so, because you have these different technology partners, you might have, incompatibilities, you might have one being taken over by acquisition, et cetera, et cetera. It's been tough. And also, historically speaking, operators set up teams that were the online team versus the retail team, and the two of them, were not necessarily talking, etc. Now, that being said, though, I think that digital wallets are really the cure here.
Okay.
Because consider this, you as a consumer, you go with your PayPal, and the exact same experience that you have on the retail side, you have the online, e-commerce, and land-based commerce, right? So high street commerce. The same thing with a gaming geared, a gaming focused wallet, such as OKTO's, where the experience is very naturally unified across multi-channel and multi-product. And I think that this is the cure.
Okay, and OKTO recently hosted the European Digitalisation Forum in your hometown. That was the beginning of July. I just wonder what was the purpose of the event? What were the key takeaways? Because you had a lot of operators actually in the audience as well. So how did it go, Filippos?
Well, we did invite operators from I think 7-8 countries, and quite a few managed to make the trip, which was fantastic, and we really thank them for it. And obviously, we missed quite a few that couldn't for obvious reasons of the pandemic. To those, the second edition is being prepared as we speak, so there'll be another opportunity. But circling back to your second question, I think it's exactly what we wanted to do: educate. We wanted to exchange ideas, educate across different trends. That's why we invited speakers from, futurists for what digital trends there are across industries, payment experts and innovators, obviously from within the industry, operators that are doing things that could be presented as case studies that involve a lot of digitalization, including even migrating from a fully analog gaming machine basis to a fully digital one, or managing to entirely achieve the omnichannel that you asked before.
Yeah.
So we had a case study from one operator that is offering the exact same odds and same offering, markets and product, retail and online. And a lot of the retail agents and workforce in that sense, and colleagues, are helping with the online as well.
Okay.
So, we heard really cool case studies, great things from those that are outside the industry. And, I think that that's what it was, making sure that we can prove that there's a common denominator, that the need to digitalize, and ultimately, as part of this digitalization, the urgency to adopt cashless.
And do you think we've kind of gone over a tipping point there? Is everyone kind of no one's pushing back. You don't get the pushback from the operators now. They're kind of
Oh
firmly
yeah,
on
oh
board.
yeah, oh yeah. I think, look, Lewis, I'm in the industry now almost 20 years, and I've never been on the operator side, right? I've always been on the vendor or now on the fintech and payment side. So I'll tell you this: I always had about a year-long resistance, positive resistance. Call it challenge, or call it questioning. You call it discussion. Whenever presenting a new idea to an operator, I always thought in my mind that when I, first met Lewis and I pitched, such and such idea, it would take about a year for the full adoption of that idea, if it was actually and in fact adopted. Nowadays, it's been a couple of years now, but ever more this year, we no longer discuss about the adoption of the solution. We jump right into the how.
Okay.
How and by when. Yeah, big change, big shift.
Well, obviously, it's been a year on since our first podcast, the Cashless Imperative. This is our follow-up. You'll be doing a second European Digitalisation Forum, and hopefully by that stage, we'll have the Cashless Definitive, Cashless. We'll drop Imperative, and we'll be further down that path.
We will go. Yeah, we will go like the Jason Bourne movies. The ultimatum.
It will be the ultimatum. I think will be the kind of the term for it.
Why not? Why not?
Okay, well, it's been brilliant speaking. It's been fantastic speaking to you today, Filippos. Thank you very much for participating. And again, we'd love to take part in the next digitalization forum that you host. Again, good luck with convincing. It sounds like the operators are on board with the idea of cashless, and we look forward to hearing more about your own solutions, your product solutions as well, actually finding homes across the European space as well. So thank you very much for your time.
Been wonderful, Lewis. Thanks, and fingers crossed we're together again on the second one.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.